Hello everyone and welcome to our 9th Nourish to Flourish webinar. If this is your first time joining us, we're so glad to have you. If you've joined us before, welcome back. My name is Emily Sylvester and I'm one of the clinical dietitians with the Stanford Lifestyle and Weight Management Clinic, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Stanford Health Library under Lifestyle and Weight Management Recorded Lectures, along with all the PowerPoints. You'll also receive an email after the session with a link to the recording. If you have any questions during the webinar, please add them to the Q&A chat box located at the bottom of your screen. We'll review those questions with our presenter during the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Now I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, Marion Seabaugh, who is today's presenter. Marion is a registered dietitian who has been part of the Stanford healthcare family for over 8 years. Her interest in weight management in the field of obesity medicine initially grew from her time spent helping individuals lose weight to improve their candidacy for lung transplant surgery. As a clinical dietitian at Stanford's Lifestyle and Weight Management Center, Marion is passionate about providing individuals nutrition counseling and practical strategies to support sustainable and impactful lifestyle changes. In her free time, Marion loves to get outside with her family. On the weekends, you can find her surfing, camping, or gardening. Today, Marion will present on low-carb fall sides. She'll share delicious, nutritious side dishes that celebrate fall flavors while keeping the carbohydrates in check. She will also provide us with tips for navigating the holiday season that allow you to enjoy the festivities without losing sight of your health goals. Now, take it away, Marion.
All right, so hi everyone. Thank you again for joining us this evening to talk about the bounty that is fall produce, as well as the bounty that is the holiday season and holiday eating. We'll review some strategies for navigating that. We'll talk more about what's in season and some specific recipes that you can try at your next big gathering. We'll also spend some time talking about how to stay on track with our health goals through the holiday season. And that time of year is already upon us. So let's dive right into it. So what's in season this time of year? Many people often associate the abundance of fresh produce with the summer months, but fall and winter also offer a diverse array of seasonal vegetables, especially here in Northern California, where we have a very long growing season. So we have lots of root veggies to pick from, like carrots, turnips, and beets. There's, of course, the cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and cabbage. Many different winter squash varieties you can find this time of year, like butternut squash and acorn squash. And last but not least, we have lots of leafy greens available, like kale, collard greens, spinach, and arugula. And why should we eat them? So, of course, like all vegetables, the fall and winter veggies are rich in many different nutrients, and therefore they offer a variety of health benefits. All vegetables, right, are great sources of dietary fiber. I know we've talked about that a lot in this webinar series, but great sources of soluble fiber as well as insoluble fiber. That's going to be really important for keeping us full and satiated between meals. Also really good for our digestive health. A lot of fall veggies are really good sources of vitamins A and C. These vitamins play a lot of really different important roles in our body, but they're especially important for our supporting our immune system and have many different antioxidant properties as well. And then certain veggies, particularly like those dark leafy greens, those cruciferous vegetables, those are going to be a really good source of minerals like potassium, calcium, and iron. Also vitamin K, right? Those micronutrients are going to work together to help support our bones, our muscles, our cardiovascular health. So I'd like you all to take a few seconds here and scan this QR code or follow the link and finish this sentence of what is your favorite fall vegetable. And we'll see if any of the recipes I've included later on highlight any of your favorite veggies, hopefully. But I guess we will see. So yeah, take a few seconds here and follow this link to complete that sentence. Okay, let's see. All right. So sprouts, Brussels sprouts, presumably sweet potatoes, delicata squash. I am talking about delicata squash later. Potatoes, yes. So of course, potatoes, turnips, sweet potatoes, those are also going to be some root veggies that are very much in season right now. Kale, other sorts of greens, sprouts. Awesome. So yeah, a lot of great variety this time of year, right? So I think that's really important to keep in mind as we head into these holiday meals. All right, so let's keep going. So next I want to talk a little bit more about why I'm focusing specifically on low carb dishes. And as this infographic implies, many traditional holiday meals in the US really tend to lean heavily towards carbohydrates. Think mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, sweet potato casserole, stuffing, cranberry sauce, dinner rolls, corn on the cob, desserts like pie and cookies. But moderating our carbohydrate intake, both at any given meal, but also just overall, can have a positive impact on our health, which I'll talk about, exactly how. But so there is really good reason to try and shift our plate to look a little bit more like this one on the right. More plants, more color, more fiber there. And I also think it's important to sort of explain a little bit about, what does low carb eating really mean, right? That can mean a lot of different things, right? On For the average person, right, we might recommend getting anywhere between 40 to 65% of your daily calories from carbohydrate. If you were following a super low carbohydrate diet or even like a true ketogenic diet, right, you might only be getting about 5 to 10% of your daily calories from carbohydrate. And so I'm not prescribing a specific carbohydrate intake goal tonight, but I am going to try to provide some context and rationale for why we might want to swap out some of those really carbohydrate heavy dishes for those that have a little bit more protein or more fiber. And one of the main benefits of reducing our carbohydrate intake is improved blood sugar control or more stable blood sugar levels. This is going to be associated with reduced feelings of hunger and cravings, which can make it easier to maintain a healthy eating pattern overall. Additionally, a lower carb eating pattern is associated with a decreased risk of developing metabolic syndrome, which is that cluster of health conditions, including high blood pressure, high triglyceride levels, that can increase our risk of heart disease and diabetes. And lastly, how does the goal of eating less carbs actually impact our food choices? So when we eat less carbs, we tend to end up with fewer processed foods, maybe fewer products that are made with refined grains or added sugars. And what do we eat instead? Usually, we might choose things with more protein. Maybe we choose to include more other whole foods like fruits and vegetables, right? And so all these factors can support broader health goals you might have, whether that's weight maintenance, weight loss, or even improved metabolic health. So let's briefly review what happens inside our bodies when we eat foods containing carbohydrates and how this can influence hunger. So when we eat a carbohydrate, this is going to break down into sugar in our digestive system. Those sugars will then be absorbed into the bloodstream and our blood sugar levels will rise. At this point, our pancreas is going to be signaled to produce the hormone insulin. And insulin is what's going to allow our cells to absorb that sugar from the blood and use the sugar either for energy or store it away for later. And that in turn is going to cause our blood sugar levels to fall. And when our blood sugar levels fall, this is part of what can cue our body to feel hungry or make us feel like we want to eat again. And so this is a super simplified image of, what sort of is happening to our blood sugars after we eat and before we eat. So it really shows how maybe eating a diet higher in sugar, higher in carbohydrates can cause those bigger peaks and valleys with our blood sugar. And that in turn is going to require a more significant insulin response on the part of our pancreas, and might in turn then cause those more intense feelings of hunger compared to if you eat those more balanced meals throughout the day and your blood sugars stay more stable overall. I think it's also important to point out that low carb does not mean no carb, right? So not all carbohydrate containing foods are created equal. And this picture shows the difference between high and low glycemic index foods. And glycemic index is just a measure of how quickly a food raises your blood sugar level after you eat it. And it not perfectly, but generally aligns with how much fiber that carbohydrate food contains. So foods with a lower glycemic index, or generally those with more fiber, such as non-starchy vegetables or steel-cut oats, are going to be digested and absorbed relatively slowly, leading to a more gradual rise in blood sugar and insulin levels, and therefore support kind of more stable energy levels throughout the day. In contrast, those high glycemic index foods or carbohydrates that generally have less fiber, like white bread or potatoes, right? Those can cause more rapid spikes in your blood sugar, and then your blood sugar may drop more quickly following, right? So this can lead to increased hunger and cravings shortly after eating. So now that we've reviewed the meaning of low carb and how carbohydrates affect our blood sugars and our appetite, let's go ahead and compare these two plates. So you can scan the QR code again to answer this question of which plate is low carb. And I'll just sort of describe what's on each plate here in case it's difficult for you to see. But on plate A, we have turkey, stuffing, or dressing of some kind, sweet potatoes with a marshmallow topping, cranberry sauce, green beans, and some mashed potatoes. And then on plate B, we have, again, turkey, Brussels sprouts with pomegranate seeds, cranberry sauce, a sweet potato, looks like it's stuffed with pecans or some other nut, and then a mixed cauliflower dish. So take a minute here to think about which plate is quote unquote low carb, and go ahead and make your selection. Okay, so yes, so far the responses seem confidently on plate B, right, being low carb. And I plugged this into a food logging app. I had to use rough estimates for what I expected or suspected the serving sizes to be. But what it told me was that plate A contained approximately 118 grams of carbohydrate, and plate B only contained 63 grams of carbohydrate. Technically, right, a low carb meal would probably be defined as something containing no more than about 45 grams of carbohydrate. So I guess if you use that definition, neither of those plates is technically low carb. But I do think it's interesting, right, reflecting on those two very full plates of food, plate B containing, about half the amount of carbs as plate A. All right. So let's talk a bit more about how we can incorporate more of these fall and winter veggies into our holiday meals. And just like we've talked about in many of the earlier webinars of the Nourish to Flourish series, the goal here is really to add those PFCs, or protein, fiber, and color. So if we can get more protein, fiber, and color on our tables, right, we're much more likely to end up with more protein, fiber, and color on our plates. And as with many other situations, this might require some planning ahead, right? So here are some questions to ask yourself when you're planning those holiday meals. For protein, what are some leaner or lower fat protein options you can serve? Those might be turkey, chicken, fish, plant-based proteins like beans, lentils, tofu, instead of those higher fat red meats or processed meats. For fiber and color, ask yourself, how can I ensure that I can fill up on veggies? Maybe you prepare a leafy green salad if that's not something that is traditionally on your table at a holiday meal, or maybe you bring a vegetable-based appetizer to start your meal with. This meal here, right, looks like it includes 3 different vegetables prepared in 3 different ways, right? And it's colorful and filling. And then last but not least, you want to ask yourself if there's any higher fat, creamy or cheesy side dishes or sauces that maybe you want to modify in any way. So that could mean tweaking the recipes, right, to use some healthier swaps or, lower fat ingredients. Or maybe you just want to provide an easy way for people to moderate their serving size at the table, right? So if you see like the gravy boat here, instead of just having people pour the gravy out of there, you could include, a small serving spoon there so people can more easily control how much they get. And so I'm going to walk through 4 different recipes. Each one highlights a different in-season vegetable. I specifically am choosing recipes with short ingredient lists. I really want to make it easy to include these foods, not more complicated or time-consuming. So first up is a beet and goat cheese salad with mixed greens, nuts, and a simple vinaigrette. Beets are a very versatile root veggie. They can be roasted, boiled, or even pickled. You can eat the beet root as well as the greens. They're nutrient dense, a great source of folate, fiber, antioxidants. Of course, they're relatively low in calories, like many other non-starchy vegetables. And beetroot gets its deep red color from a natural food coloring, from a pigment called betalain, which is often used as a natural food coloring. And beets also contain dietary nitrates, which are a compound that convert into nitric oxide in the body and can actually help lower blood pressure. So they're a really great food to include in your diet and hopefully at your holiday meals. But the biggest pain point with beets is that they are a pain to prepare, right? So they take a long time to boil or roast. The bright red pigment can get all over your hands, all over your kitchen. So using pre-steamed beets can really be a game changer. These are just a couple options that are available at Trader Joe's and Costco. But this is really going to eliminate the need for any lengthy cooking time. The beets will still have that beautiful bright red color and still have all those great health benefits as well. This next recipe is for a simple roasted delicata squash with Parmesan cheese and dried as well as fresh herbs. I personally love delicata squash. I think it's really pretty. It has that striped pattern. It's easy. It's quick to work with. And because the rind or the skin is edible, you don't need to peel it before cooking. The skin actually develops, I think, sort of like a chewy but tender texture when cooked. It's really good. And it's also a quick cooking winter squash. So it will roast or be cooked through in about 20 to 25 minutes. So it can be good for those, quick weeknight meals, as well as those more special meals. The seeds are edible, similar to like a pumpkin seed. So you can soak and roast those for a tasty snack if you'd like as well. And squash is also just a really convenient ingredient to have on hand in that it stores really well. So it can sit on your counter for days, maybe even weeks, and it's not going to go bad. Of course, a simple recipe like this where you're simply sort of seasoning and roasting the squash can easily be substituted out for really many other vegetables, but also other types of squash if you prefer. Acorn squash would be great this way, butternut squash. So it can really depend on what your preference is and what you can easily find. This next recipe is for a fennel and citrus salad with shallots and olives. I think many of us are familiar with fennel as a dried spice. The flavor of fennel seeds is a little bit sweet, a little bit like licorice. Fennel can also, though, be eaten fresh. And as a fresh vegetable, it has a much milder flavor. I much prefer it as a fresh vegetable as opposed to the spice. And both the fennel bulb as well as the fronds are edible. It's often paired with citrus fruits in recipes like this one, but it can also be served on its own, just with a simple vinaigrette. And I did want to point out, of course, a salad like this with the fruit is going to contain some additional carbohydrate. But those carbohydrates from the fruit are going to be really nicely balanced out by the high fiber content, right? So both citrus fruit in the pulp sacs, the skin of the fruit, as well as fennel as that fresh vegetable is going to have quite a bit of fiber in it to balance out those carbohydrates. And if you aren't familiar with fennel, it basically looks like this large white bulb with these leafy green stalks growing at the top. And so once you remove those fronds, you can either dice or slice your fennel however you like it. And like I said, use it as either a salad garnish or even the base of a salad. And last but not least, let's talk about cauliflower. So this recipe is for a spicy oven roasted cauliflower with a yogurt dipping sauce to balance it out. And as many of you are probably aware, cauliflower has become a very popular low carb substitute in our food supply. You can find cauliflower rice, cauliflower gnocchi, mashed potatoes, pizza crusts made from cauliflower. But it's also really good as is, and I wanted to highlight that. I personally think of it a little bit like tofu in that it doesn't have a whole lot of flavor on its own, but it can pick up any flavor or spices you add to it really well. And of course, cauliflower is also packed with fiber, micronutrients like vitamin C, K, folate, choline, as well as antioxidants. White cauliflower is by far the most common variety you might see in stores, but you can also find colored cauliflower, like purple, green, and orange. Particularly if you look at like farmers markets is where I've seen it the most. And I think similar to cooking with rainbow carrots, like the colorful carrots you can find now in the stores, I think this is another really fun way to just add more color to any meals you are preparing. This recipe does also call for that simple yogurt dipping sauce, but I think in general, when you're thinking about any sort of creamy side dishes or sauces for your meals, plain Greek yogurt is just a really great ingredient to have on hand. It's that higher protein, lower calorie substitute for a lot of different other dairy products like heavy cream, sour cream, cream cheese that you might see in recipes. And the great thing about it is there's so many yogurt options now. So if you're really trying to avoid lactose, you can find good lactose-free options. If you're just trying to avoid dairy products in general, there are also lots of good plant-based yogurts as well. And these are just two examples here of that. So hopefully you'll give one or more of those recipes a try over the next few weeks. But I want to end tonight talking a bit more about navigating the holiday season in general. Holidays, hopefully, are a joyful and fulfilling time of year. But I think sometimes in the context of forming or sticking to new health-related habits, the holidays can be challenging, they might be stressful or overwhelming. There's a lot of food, a lot of family gatherings, a lot of people's opinions, maybe, right? So regardless, my hope is that you all can thrive this holiday season, not just survive. And with that in mind, I think it's really important to recognize that you can still enjoy yourself while still prioritizing your well-being. So I think you can enjoy yourself and prioritize your well-being. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think this can look a little different for everyone. So maybe it means making a commitment to yourself to stay consistent with some non-food habits. like staying active, prioritizing your sleep, or hitting your daily hydration goal, and allowing yourself to simply partake in those holiday traditions and maybe foods that come along with those traditions. Maybe it means setting one or two small goals related to nutrition. So, really thinking about how you're going to approach holiday meals in terms of what and how much you eat. Or maybe you decide more broadly your goal is weight maintenance rather than weight loss during this time. And I think it's okay to stay flexible with your goals and give yourself some grace when plans change, because we all know we can't always control everything when other people are involved. That being said, right, so for those of you who want some sort of practical advice for how to approach holiday meals, I think these are two tools that you can bring with you to help guide your food decisions. The first is portion awareness. So getting comfortable with using your hands as a serving size tool is very helpful, right? So not many of us are going to whip out a measuring cup at the Thanksgiving table, but you can use your hands and the My Plate guidelines that we've discussed previously to help build your plate. So if you take your fist and you assume that that's about 1 cup's worth of vegetables, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to get 2 fists worth of veggies on my plate first before I add anything else. Then you want to look for where is your protein coming from, right? And we have different size hands, but you can assume, right, the palm of your hand is probably going to give you about 3 to 5 ounces of protein, and trying to get that on your plate next. And then if there's any of those dishes that you really, really enjoy that you've been looking forward to, but that might be higher in carbohydrates or maybe higher in fat, you want to use that half cup guide, or about your cup's hand worth, and add that to your plate, if you still have room. And then another very simple but very effective strategy for managing portions is simply going to be using a smaller plate, right? So grabbing a salad or an appetizer plate instead of that large dinner plate. And then I think another helpful tool to keep in mind at holiday meals is the hunger scale, or just more broadly, mindful eating. And I think practicing mindful eating can be difficult at holiday meals. There's maybe lots of conversation, you're catching up with friends or family you haven't seen in a long time. It might be a little loud or chaotic. But having that intention when you show up to the meal can really help keep it at your forefront of your mind. So paying attention, eat slowly, taking time to savor each bite, putting your utensils down between each bite. And then if you want to go even deeper, right, you can try applying the hunger scale, right, and using that both before you start eating as well as during the meals, and really trying to pay attention to those hunger and fullness cues, with the goal to stop eating when you feel satisfied rather than stuffed. So trying to stop eating right around that 5 to 6 mark on the hunger scale. And then staying hydrated and fueled during the day, right? So instead of waiting all day to eat and drink and showing up at a 1 or showing up feeling starving, right? You want to make sure you're eating consistently, properly nourishing your body during the day leading up to that holiday meal, so you can show up more at like a 3 or a 4, right? Just hungry, not starving. And I really like this headline about holiday eating. So it says, mindful eating may be the most important dish at the holiday table, because I think takes the focus away from the holiday foods themselves. And it is more about how much you eat, or even just how you approach that meal, how you eat. And hopefully we can allow ourselves to enjoy our favorite treats, but do so in moderation, right? So maybe you share your dessert with the person sitting next to you, or maybe you purposefully take a smaller portion of that dessert than you've taken in previous years. Focusing on quality over quantity, right? So if there's a really special food that you've been looking forward to eating all year, maybe your grandma makes like an amazing apple pie, right? Have a slice of that pie and enjoy it, right? But maybe you just have that. You don't sample everything that's on the dessert table simply because it's there. And then along those same lines is sort of trying to leave the holiday food with the holiday. So Halloween has already come and gone, but I apply the same concept to a holiday like Halloween, right? If there's a candy that you're really looking forward to eating all year and it's widely available on Halloween, have a piece of that candy on Halloween, but then donate any leftover candy you might have. So same thing with this grandma's apple pie, right? Enjoy it, right? But then if there's leftover pie, maybe someone else can bring home those leftovers. And then practicing saying no, thank you. So I laugh when I say this because I know it's much easier said than done. I think peer pressure, cultural family influences can be very strong. But when it comes to someone offering you, that third glass of wine or that second serving of pie, if you feel satisfied and you don't want it, it's okay to say no thanks. And I think practicing that skill, right, where you're sort of standing up for your personal health goals is going to be really important for, both adopting new habits, but then especially sustaining those habits. Maintaining your activity level throughout the holiday season, right? I think that's good for our mental health as well as our physical health. And so thinking about how you might include some movement as part of family get-togethers. Maybe you can make a new tradition, right? Signing up for a turkey trot on Thanksgiving morning. Maybe you coordinate a holiday themed scavenger hunt at a nearby park before or after you share a meal with your family. So again, thinking about ways that you can keep up with your activity. And then after the holidays, taking some time to reflect on what really worked well for you and maybe what you want to do differently next year. So what are some of like the healthy habits you were able to successfully sustain throughout the holiday season, whether they were food related or not food related? What kind of maybe fell through the cracks and why do you think that happened? And so thinking about, again, what can you do differently next year? All right, so one last question for you all tonight. I want you to answer this question. So which strategy will you try this holiday season? Will you try one of those new recipes, practicing mindful eating, whether that's using the hunger scale or focusing on quality over quantity at holiday meals? Will you try to fill up half your plate with fiber and color? Or if you're feeling really ambitious, will you try to do all of the above? So I'll give you a few minutes to scan this, and then we'll see what you guys are thinking. Oh, wow. We have some overachievers here. All of the above. Most of you are going to apply all of the above. I think that's great. And then I can't help but saying, because I say this a lot with setting goals, right? I think it's great to try all of the above, but if any one of these strategies is really sticking out to you, I would encourage you to focus on that one thing, because I think that can be powerful to give your focus to one thing versus trying to do it all. All right, so thank you all for listening. I hope you all took away something new to think about over the next few weeks, whether it's a new recipe or a new strategy for making your holidays a little less stressful and more enjoyable. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marion, for such a wonderful recipes and the practical guidance during the holiday season. I am definitely planning on making a few changes to my own holiday menu now and adding in that beet and goat cheese salad that looks delicious. So now, like she said, it's time for the Q&A portion. So if you have any questions you haven't added to the Q&A section, please go ahead and do so now. I'm seeing, okay. So I have a couple questions on what does it mean when a food label indicates net carbs?
This is a great question. So net carbs is not technically part of the nutrition facts label, but you will sometimes see it on food packaging, particularly for items that are being marketed as maybe like keto friendly or low carb. And basically, what that means is they've taken the total grams of carbohydrate in that food and they've subtracted the grams of fiber as well as the grams of sugar alcohols. And so sometimes people will use it if they're trying to just focus on, like I said, reducing their total carbohydrate intake while not worrying so much about those components of food that aren't going to have as big of an impact on their blood sugars, or aren't going to be, digested by our bodies. That being said, right, if you are, for whatever reason, really needing to keep a close eye on your carbohydrate intake, for monitoring your blood sugars, we always recommend referring to the total carbohydrates, not the net carbohydrates. So I think, net carbohydrates can be an interesting tool for people, right? If they're maybe trying to follow a lower carb diet, but not worried so much about exactly how many carbs, but not something that you want to rely on too heavily over the total carbs.
Thank you. And then also, you mentioned mindful eating and quality over quantity. Are there any mindful eating apps that you would suggest?
Yes. So for mindful eating, I would say the one that most people have probably heard of would be like Noom. So Noom, of course, can help you track your food overall, but Noom also gives you a lot of advice in terms of and education, basically in terms of the rationale for like how we eat and how we make food decisions, sort of the psychology behind eating. And they give you sort of like mini daily lessons and things. So Noom, you'll get some exposure to that. And then another app that you can use is called Eight, or maybe it's called Eight Plate now, but Eight, so ATE, and that's basically going to be like a food picture logging app. So it's sort of triggering that mindfulness by having you photograph your food before you eat it, and kind of guiding you through some mindful eating practices in that way as well.
Very helpful. Thank you for that. And then it looks like we have a question regarding your fennel recipe. Can fennel aid in weight management? And if so, in what ways?
So I have heard of fennel sometimes being promoted, or fennel seeds or fennel supplements, being promoted potentially as like a weight loss aid. Um, uh, there are no studies to support that, taking fennel for that purpose is actually going to, change your body weight or change your body composition. So I wouldn't recommend it in that sense. That being said, fennel, like I said, it is a great source of fiber. So similar to many of our other non-starchy vegetables, that fiber content is what is going to keep us feeling full and satiated and can really help with portion control, right? And so indirectly, of course, can really help maybe with weight management or weight loss. But fennel in itself is not going to do anything magical for weight loss.
Okay, great. Thank you. And let's answer one more question. So we had a few questions. You had mentioned uh, fueling basically before the big festive meal. Do you recommend any meals specific that can help curb your appetite by the time you get to the actual meal that is being planned?
Sure. Yeah. So nothing in particular, right? I don't think there's like anything magic or perfect to eat in the day leading up to the holiday meal. But you want to apply those same concepts we recommend all the time in terms of making sure your meals earlier in the day are good sources of protein. So a good sort of rule of thumb or starting point could be to aim for about 20 grams of protein at each meal. And of course, you can change it from there, but that can be a decent starting place. And then making sure you have fiber there as well. We know that protein and fiber together are really powerful in terms of making us feel full and satiated, and again, keeping our blood sugar levels stable. So, I think for some people, grabbing something quick, maybe they're not going to have time to prepare meals. They're busy, they're traveling to get to that holiday meal. Maybe they want to just, drink a protein shake or eat a protein bar. But I think if you're home and you have access to, your regular kitchen and your regular food, you want to just apply that same concept of making sure you get a good source of protein on your plate, making sure you have some fiber there as well, so it can really sort of stick with you and you show up to that holiday meal, like I said, feeling hungry and excited to eat, but not feeling really starving.
Great. I appreciate that tip as well. So thank you guys. We'll end with that for attending today's session. A special thank you to our speaker, Marion, for sharing such wonderful ideas for the upcoming festivities. As a reminder, the recording of this session will be posted in the Stanford Health Library, and you will receive an email with a copy of the recordings by next week. We look forward to seeing you next month for our next webinar on December 17th, titled Cheers to the Season Festive Holiday Mocktails. So I hope everybody has a good evening and good night.